Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls around the world. It's time for the internet's favorite movie-centric list-making podcast, uh, 10 to 1. I am one of your hosts, Josh, joined with me, as always, by Jen.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Don't say good, just, sit there and nod. Josh understands.
Yes, I do. I want to send a very special shout out to our legions of Swedish fans. And
Ooh.
congratulations on your country for taking home top prize in the Eurovision Song Contest this year. Not saying I would never say it's fixed, but you know, it's a good year to win it when next year is the 50th anniversary of ABBA. You know,
Super awesome.
quite coincidental. So hashtag cha 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 Finland.
Hey,
If you watched, you know.
Hawaii is also in the uh in the entertainment news. Do you know why?
Did somebody take my idea of throwing your ex's ring into a volcano?
No, I'm sorry, that isn't what happened. Although,
Well,
that
good.
is kind of an interesting proposition. I do kind of like that actually. But no, that is absolutely not what happened. Can you guess what happened?
See if I can guess what happened. Let's see. Uh,
It has to do with Maui.
Maui. Well, are we talking the island of Maui or the
So we
person?
are talking the island of Maui. It's a Hawaii it's a Hawaii entertainer, but they're from Maui.
Jim Neighbors. No, I think he
No,
died a long time ago.
I think he may actually have died a long time ago. Yes.
Let's see. Maui. Uh, Hawaiian entertainer. Let's see. I know Dwayne the Rock Johnson grew up in Hawaii for a bit.
That's actually pretty true. He did. Although I'm having a kind of a beef with his persona right now. Good lord, what's going on with him?
He's dedicating himself to never being poor again. I think he's beyond that threshold though, so I think he could lay off the gas a bit.
Okay, listen, before we start our list, let's just talk for a second about how when you fall out of love, so to speak, or however, whatever you want to say, um, with an actor, and specifically with an actor that just seems to be behaving badly, all of a sudden their movies stop being as exciting to watch. Like, you know, to anybody out there who is an actor, don't think that just because you made good movies that all of a sudden behaving badly will make people not think twice about watching those movies, because I'm here as one fan to say it absolutely matters. How about you?
Yeah, there are a lot of artists out there that I'm not going to say I have some sort of active I will not watch these people list, but you know, just as an example, I find it difficult to watch Kevin Spacey anymore.
See, yeah.
Not I can't take away from his talent because he is amazing in front of a camera, but I always have that thought in the back of my head like he's not a great dude, which
Yeah.
is a shame because we have you know several different sort of passions in common. Bobby Darin being apparently one of them, and Jack Benny. And there are so few, living Jack Benny fans as it is. It sucks to see one go down. But that I guess that's really where our likenesses end.
But do you think, does it bother you, like, to watch certain shows when you know that the person, or the like the big person in the show, the star in the show, has done something or is behaving really badly, like, does that change the way that you look at their work? Because it does for me. And
Yeah, it makes it more difficult to, well, look at it at a very basic level. Movies, television, things of that nature. It's all about suspension of disbelief, right?
yeah,
And being able to buy this world that's being presented to you, and get get sold into everything. When you have someone's real life persona kind of permeating through their performance, it really is difficult to invest in the illusion. And I think, like I said, just at a basic level, that is my core issue. That, like, I can't see a Kevin Spacey performance without thinking, yeah, but what about all that stuff that he's accused of doing? It's making it hard for me to not see Kevin Spacey.
yeah, yeah. And I think that that's kind of the thing. The thing is, like, it's hard to extract the actors from whatever their deeds are. So as long as they, and I know that this must be terrible, and I'm so sorry that, when you live your life sort of like in that limelight, how it's got to be hard to be constantly scrutinized, but at the same time, if this is the life that you want to lead, then there are consequences that go along with, behaving in a way that just make other people scratch their head and go, "What are you doing?" It doesn't make your art any more appealing, I guess, is the way that it goes. I don't know.
I think, as far as long term stuff goes, because we're hearing about stuff that happened, decades ago, right? Long time ago, and I think at that point there was this sense of protection that you could just do anything
Right.
and nobody's going to say
Because you were
anything.
because you, and I still feel like that is the truth, right? And I mean, I feel like probably on the list tonight, I feel like we're probably not going to run across a ton of people who have had like super, other than, yeah, they were old Hollywood alcoholics or things like that, but we don't it seems like more and more in recent years, as in, like, from maybe the 1990s and move forward, we are entering into a state where actors and entertainers at large get larger than life really fast, and they don't kind of like go through a process of ramping up. It's kind of like becoming a rock star, it can happen so fast and you're just not prepared for the life. And so it feels like what ends up happening is they don't benefit from the guidance and the, sort of mentorship of others. And then sometimes, even when they do, the stars that we get, we act as if they are kind of like, mini gods, demigods in the world of, and we have to do exactly as they say or dress exactly as they dress. And, oh, it's trendy to do this because a Kardashian did it or something. And I'm not saying that, there shouldn't be a place for us to idolize other people, because yeah, that's just something that we do. But wow, it's really gotten to the point where, celebrities and people with big names, it seems like they think that they can do no wrong. And so they act as if there are zero consequences for any of their behaviors. And that's really troubling. And I find it to be even more troubling when that enters the art phase, because in order to subjectively enjoy art, you have to sort of at least understand a little bit about who the, well, I won't just say the actor, but who the artist is. Like, you get a feel for who the artist is behind the art by viewing their art. And I don't like this idea that, everything can be completely without consequence simply because I'm an artist and I say so. Like, that's disgusting, you know?
You know, just on a quick, side note here, still very much related to what we're talking about in the world of wrestling.
Oh
You
boy.
have your veterans, right?
Hmm.
And you have sort of the young guys, the people that are green rookies, whatever you want to call them.
Hmm.
And for gosh, several years now, as the younger guys from 10, 15 years ago, uh, sort of got their veteran status. Some of the even older, guys from the 90s would, pop up every now and then. And the thing, we'll say pre 2000, that's just arbitrary marker, but close to the marker. We'll just say pre 2000. Life on the road for a wrestler was full of crazy stories about drinking, doing drugs, hooking up with the ring rats, just all sorts of
Ring rats.
a crazy lifestyle, right?
Uh huh.
Um, and then I read a quote from I don't remember who, but one of the older guys. He was like big in the 70s, 80s, and he was taking a look at the younger people, the younger wrestlers of today. And he said, back in my day, it was all about drinking and getting pills and doing whatever it was just to get by, life on the road. These guys today, these kids today, they just take their Xbox everywhere and stay in their hotel room. What kind of stories are they going to have? It's like I,
Okay.
they learned that they're kind of responsible for their actions, and they'd rather you know
Hmm.
stay out of trouble and play video games. So at least
This.
in an area of entertainment, uh, they're kind of learning to pretty much kind of keep your nose clean. Not everybody does, but uh, there's certainly a concerted group that would rather do that.
And and that is not, don't get me wrong, because that's not to say that any of the actors that we talk about, especially tonight or on any other night, are any less talented than, you know they deserve our accolades. They absolutely do. It's just that sometimes I get very tripped up by this idea that somehow an actor can be sort of free of consequences, including when we view their art. And this gets really complicated, especially for me, because I know that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people behind some movies that I want to give my support to. And yet it becomes very difficult when the lead is somebody that I know or am experiencing in whatever zeitgeist issues are going on as being, this is just kind of perilous behavior that I don't want to be a part of. So, yeah,
It's almost
complicated, but
it's
interesting
almost like they
conversation.
think they're royalty.
It's almost like they think that they are royalty. And that is the perfect, absolute segue for our list tonight, which I came up with called British royalty in films. Now, no, we're not actually talking about real British royalty appearing in films, because that would be an extremely short list and probably just a bunch of documentaries, and that wouldn't be so exciting. So
Documentaries. Why didn't I add any
our
documentaries?
so our list tonight is all about fictional monarchs from Britain, or queens, or the royal family in film. And I
Mm-hmm.
gotta say, this list made me
Mad.
so happy.
Oh,
I mean, I put this list together and I started thinking, oh my God, I need to go back and watch these movies. They were so unbelievably awesome. So I'm really excited for tonight's list. How did you do with yours?
it's gonna be a weird one.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, how about I start us off this week?
Okay, feel free.
Okay.
Because yeah.
All right. So I'm going to start off with a movie that didn't have a ton of the monarch in it, but it was still pretty exciting. And honestly, part of the whole subplot of this movie was getting ready for the monarch's visit. I am talking about Downton Abbey, the movie. They had a special visit from King George V, who shows up and is basically the monarch shows up because his plans have to change. He gets derailed with another plan that they had made. But hey, they end up at Downton Abbey, and the entire staff is absolutely both thrilled and on pins and needles because there is a proper way to do everything, and everything must be done in the proper way. Downton Abbey is one of those movies that, even if you have never seen Downton Abbey as a series, you can still absolutely revel in the joy of it. It is really heartwarming. It is not whimsical, but it's the kind of movie that you can watch on any evening and kind of feel good about after you leave it. Like you're gonna like it. And that to me makes me super happy. Downton Abbey is also, I think, just in terms of the monarch visit, it really shows you that you can you can really see what people or why people were so obsessed with the proper use of, different courses at dinner and the placement, people's seating arrangements, just so many different kinds of things. Though the proper is always the right word to use with Downton Abbey. I really liked this movie a lot. I also really liked the idea that everyone who is at Downton Abbey understands their place in the system, and it's kind of a weird thing to say, but I never feel like anybody in Downton Abbey is necessarily, not in the movie, is like mistreated. But sometimes they need to be shown a different way of looking at things, and I do feel like that is exactly what happens here. Even the royalty ends up learning a bit about who the staff are and why they are so important, so it all around feels very good. Gonna keep it super short on this one, but Downton Abbey with King George V is my choice for number 10.
Well, that sounds absolutely reasonable.
I'm guessing that your number 10 may not be reasonable.
My number 10 is the opposite of reasonable
Uh-oh.
because it comes from a movie that is quite the opposite of reason or facts or anything else coherent, if you will. Uh, my number 10 comes from 2021's America, the motion picture. And we're talking about King James. You know, the Bible guy,
Ooh, that guy.
how he tried to crush America in the Revolutionary War
How dare him.
after he
Also, James didn't try to crush America in the Revolutionary War.
sure
That
did.
wasn't James. No, the Revolutionary War was George.
No. Did you watch America the motion picture?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I was going off of fact, not off of movie. Sorry.
So
Proceed.
so the movie opens with Benedict Arnold murdering everybody that signed the Declaration of Independence and then promptly going to Ford's Theater where he kills Abraham Lincoln, George Washington's childhood friend. George chases him throughout the city, but he doesn't quite get him because Benedict Arnold had turned into a werewolf and he's, quite fast. But anyway, on to the actual monarchy part of the flick. You see, King James has this idea to where he's going to seed clouds with tea and make everybody more loyal to the crown. And that's his plan. But George Washington and his team of dude bros, like, Sam Adams and Paul Revere Uh,
This is getting better by the moment, by the way.
oh yeah, yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, it is absolutely crazy. This. It is an animated film, but it is nuts. And you might have noticed that it takes a few scant liberties with the actual story and timeline, just a little bit.
Just teeny anachronisms. Just teeny.
Yeah, it's a tiny little pieces of. But yeah, King James is super evil, and um, he wants to see the clouds. That's what he wants to do. And the reason it's on the list is because it's straight because of the insanity of this movie. The cast is, I mean, if you see a list of, let me pull up the list. I already had it pulled up. I just was on the wrong part. All right. Imagine if you saw a bill with Channing Tatum, Jason Mantzoukas, Olivia Munn, Bobby Moynihan, Will Forte, Simon Pegg, and so on and so on. You would think, huh, that's an interesting group. What are they doing? What is this, some sort of romantic comedy? And then you go Channing Tatum as George Washington. It's like, oh, and Olivia Munn is Thomas Edison. So yeah, America the Motion Picture is full blown insanity for just shy of 100 minutes. If you're into absolutely nutso behavior, um, then by all means check it out. But it is my number 10. King James is the monarch represented.
That is actually, I think that okay. So I'm already kind of sensing possibly a little bit of a theme here. So I'm a little bit more literal in my interpretation of the list homework, and it sounds to me like you are just a little bit more, let's just say, artistic, looking at this through the filter of okay, so not necessarily, oh boy, what's a good word to even say for this? Just that you took an artistic flair to your list tonight. Do you think that that might be true?
I think what's true is I added all of the movies that I'd seen to the list, and I do have somewhat of a reputation for enjoying a specific
Ah,
kind of movie.
okay. Well, I mean,
And no,
that's
Kevin Smith has not featured any royalty in his films.
and no, I was thinking about that actually, because I was thinking, well, how's Josh gonna bring Kevin Smith into this? And honestly, I don't know.
Yeah,
I feel like that might
it's
be a
not
bit of
there.
a problem. Yeah. Well,
I tried.
um, okay. Okay. My number 9 film is, it's called The Tower of London. And The Tower of London is, this is a really kind of weird film. Um, and I hesitate to say, that, like, this isn't my favorite of, all the movies that have royalty in it, but it's one of my most, um it's like so odd, that it kind of makes me feel like it should be included just for the art of it. Um there's a lot of speculation about how and why this movie was made. And I have to say that after watching it even a second and a third time, I still don't quite understand what the long term or what the long range artistic plan was for this film, other than just to maybe be a little bit of both social commentary and a bit of like has kind of a sardonic bite to it. It was done in 1939, and it is it's a black and white film. It's deemed as historical, but it's weird historical. It has Boris Karloff in it. And so, you can't watch any movie with Boris Karloff and not, wonder where is Dracula. Um, but it's crazy interesting. It's also apparently the person who directed this film, whose name was Roland V. Lee, had traveled to England and saw the Tower of London, and then wanted to somehow recreate that feeling. He had a really kind of small budget to deal with. He also didn't quite know how to put battle scenes together, and that was a big deal because he had 400 extras, and it was kind of crazy. Um, they finished the film, and the way that I think the part of the issue with this film is just in the way that it is edited because it's edited in such an odd way, that it kind of gives you like uncanny valley almost vibes to it. Um, there is a character here who his name is Mord, and he's a club-footed executioner. And so some of those things are like, they're crazy in terms of the space that they occupy in the story. But then there's another piece of this, which is he he's murdering people, right? Because he's the executioner. And as he's murdering all these people, he begins to take these little tiny small figures, like, teeny tiny real to life action figures, out of this throne room dollhouse until it's just him. And so it becomes this like weird story of basically the like what really happened here, how did all these people die, why were they die, what does the Tower of London even have to do with any of these things. And it becomes a little bit apparent as time goes by. But I will just say that, just like my synopsis of this film, it is really confusing and very there's a lot of upheaval in the storyline. So don't go into it expecting that you're going to see something which, kind of runs like a coherent beginning, middle, and end, because it doesn't really feel like that. It feels like a lot of jumbled together scenes that somehow all kind of come together at the end, but it makes you kind of wonder, well, how did it all come together, how did it all actually come down to this. I really like it simply because it's just such a great example of kind of inventive storytelling. It's inventive cinema for sure. And the cast is really good. You have this person whose name was Basil Rathbone, and he's Richard, or the Duke of Gloucester. um, you have Boris Karloff, who's Mord. That's the executioner, and he does a great job. And Vincent Price is in it as Duke of Clarence. That's sort of crazy, right? To have Vincent Price and Boris Karloff in the same movie. And a couple of other people who you may not know, but you may recognize them. And I have to say that just from start to finish, this is just one of those really kind of weird experimental art pieces that I did really like. So I am going, and the royalty in this is there's King Edward the Fourth, and then there's also Richard the Third, who is basically Duke of Gloucester in the movie, but will become Richard the Third. So those are the two people that are in there. I believe also there might be Henry the Sixth might also be in there. In any event, it's very interesting. You'll like it if you watch it. But yeah, just be prepared for some questions afterwards. So my choice number 9 is it's called, it isn't even called the Tower of London. It's just called Tower of London. done 1939.
I had to go ahead and add it to your publicly displayed list on our letterboxed account for the show, 1021 Pod. Give it a
Is that what he,
follow.
did that one even show up?
Yeah.
Oh, good. So, like, it is mainstream, not just
Well, you
picked
know,
out of the
Letterboxd
Gen
is
Vault of archives that nobody will ever know about. Because that does
Letterboxd is
happen.
known for having a lot of deep cuts available to catalog.
I hear that that's actually like a critique of my choices. My choices are sometimes too esoteric for people. So
And mine are too mainstream for people. So together, with our powers combined,
we are milk toast. Oh no, wait a minute. That's not. No, that's wrong. Anyway.
Powder
So
Toast
what's
Man.
your number 9? I'm excited to hear now.
My number 9 is all about Kevin Smith.
Oh no! Is he actually British royalty? Because I kind of was sort of wondering myself.
Yes, he is
I
the
knew it. I knew
Duke
it.
of
I knew it.
Earl.
No, he is definitely the Duke of Sandwich.
Uh,
Or the Earl of Sandwich. See, I don't even know my proper honorifics.
well, unfortunately, no, because in the time it took me to talk about Kevin Smith, still haven't found a movie where he's made featuring royalty from British royalty, I should say. But my number 9 is one very much tied to very much tied to royalty there, because the title says it all. The King's Man.
Huh.
Yeah, you thought I was going to go all nutso on you again. Nope. This one actually has. I mean, it's not like a true to life rendition of royalty, but it does have, uh, you know, King George in it, um, and he's a king and has these guys that work for him called, the Kingsmen, and this is kind of way back, like a prequel to those movies. It's the King's Man trying to take down Rasputin and whatnot. If you've seen the Kingsman, you know what to expect. Hard R rated action with a lot of silliness. Matthew Vaughn does what Matthew Vaughn does, and he gives you action worth watching and hilarious moments, sort of worth reveling in. This is no exception. I'm not going to say it's better than the Kingsman movies because those really delivered on a whole new level. But
Oh, did they ever? You can't get better than Samuel L. Jackson, Michael Caine, and Colin Firth together.
yeah,
Yeah.
that church scene, dear Lord. See
oh,
what I did there?
yeah. that truly is good. I agree. Okay, sorry. Continue.
But I did want to, not just kind of bat around with the same kings over and over again. So 1919, early 1900, 1902, I'm going to say ish, we have this story set, and it's just a fun, exciting ride, worth a watch. And that's one of the reasons I'm being a little scant on the details, because I watched it once and I was like, yeah, I saw it. I'm good. But again, I looked at all of my possibilities to add to the list and thought, okay, this almost by default cracks the top 10. So the King's Man, definitely worth a watch.
Okay, I mean I feel like that's a pretty solid choice, and I am getting more and more optimistic as we go through our list that we are actually doing this list well.
Let's
Um,
not get ahead of ourselves.
we'll. I mean, we're only at number 8, so there's plenty of time to flop and fail. But so far, yeah, we're doing pretty good. Um, My number 8 choice is a movie called The Madness of King George. And if you have not seen The Madness of King George, it is infinitely worth a watch. I know I say that about all the choices that I really like, but no, really, this is actually worth it. Um, the Madness of King George is, in one sense, it's actually really sad, because you sort of understand on a very visceral level that this man was truly just going insane. But it's also, and it's supposed to be funny. I mean, it's drama comedy, so there's lots of moments of levity, and a lot of them are at the expense, obviously, of King George. Um, but there's also quite an amazing cast that supports King George while he's slowly going mad. And it is really the story of how they kind of all came together to run the country, because although George wanted to be at some points involved, he was really unable, and he made choices that were, let's just say, they were less than good. They were just not beneficial to anyone in any place. And at the time that King George was monarch, Britain was still very much expanding. And it's odd to say that it was expanding, but I mean the imperial state of Britain, of England, was still a heavy thing for a long time. And as that was happening, there was a really interesting sort of behind the scenes thing with the monarchy about, how much power do we give the monarchs, and what are we actually able to sort of take for our own, as in, like, can we actually govern the country? And so, like I said, lots of levity, lots of interesting moments in this movie. But and although King George obviously features prominently, I will say that I think personally that the supporting cast in this are just absolutely unbelievably good. They carry the movie in a way that is so unexpected. Um, and now the other thing, which I will definitely say, is I think that this movie really gives you an excellent idea of how difficult it would have been many years ago, 1700s, to live in a time when we had zero understanding of mental illness, or just very cursory understanding of mental illness. And things were incredibly difficult for anybody who was not just neurodivergent. I mean, God forbid you were any of that, but people that had real difficulties in major depressions, major illnesses, major mental sort of affects. And they lumped everything into one thing. They lumped everything into being mad. The madness is just sort of like the catch-all for, well, he was crazy, but why was he crazy? And the movie doesn't get too far into that kind of stuff, but it does really illustrate how difficult life was for people that lived at this time, because it just makes you kind of, it gives you a keener sense of lucky that you live today, when, as bad as some mental affects can be treated, at least we have some understanding of them. um and also, I mean, just from a purely artistic standpoint, the costuming is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, truly gorgeous. And the dialogue is, it's spoken really well. I mean, they really put a lot of thought into the script. So I highly suggest this movie. I feel like you will absolutely love it. Take a listen, watch the show, and tell me what you think. What do you think about what it must have been like to have any kind of problem back then, and compare it to what we experience today? I'd love to hear about that. So, my number 8, The Madness of King George.
Hmm. Mad, you say?
Mad as a Hatter.
Well, how do you say?
Yeah, he was mad as a hatter. Do you know where that term came from? Mad as a hatter.
I'm guessing it has to do with uh, what do they call it? Haberdashery nut jobs.
Hattiers, people that made hats, especially the tall hats that were very in vogue for a very long time,
Hmm.
used a special mercury to cure and tan the leather. And as a result, many of them went absolutely crazy because mercury poisoning is a terrible thing and it makes you lose your faculties. And that's exactly what happened. And so it happened so frequently that the term mad as a hatter became a thing.
Nah. Okay.
So, yep, there you
The
go.
more you know.
Little bit of interesting idioms for today.
Well, I guess I'm on my number 8,
You are
right?
on your number 8.
Well, I've seen two great uh, Robin Hood movies in my day, and they're
Only
both
two?
on my list.
Wow. But only
Yes,
two? Really? Wow.
yes, yes.
Okay.
And this one, some will argue, is the best, but I say, nay, there is one better. But we're not going to talk about that one just yet. Just know I'm saying there's two Robin Hood movies on my list, because pickings are slim. But
Oh
I'd
boy.
stand by this selection either way because it comes from the year of our Robin 1973, and it is, well, it's Robin Hood. I said it numerous times, but it's Walt Disney's Robin Hood.
Oh, it's that Robin
It's
Hood.
that
The
Robin
thumb
Hood.
sucking King John.
King, you say?
Well, you know, he was eventually king, even though he was only prince in the movie.
Yes, that's the one. Uh, it is definitely for the time an all-star cast, um, especially if you're a fan of classic radio. You know, voice actors. Andy Devine comes to mind as Friar Tuck, and Phil Harris, legendary band leader from the Jack Benny Show. Uh, okay, most people know him as Baloo, um, or Little John, as he's in this. But yeah, Phil Harris, legend in the radio world, and it's just a wonderful all star cast for for me. Okay, for me, I'm the one that thinks they're all stars, and it tells the story of Robin Hood, where all the characters are animals, uh, portrayed as different animals. Robin Hood being a red fox, kind of, you know, odd since Robin is his name. I wonder if anybody. I wonder if in the meeting they were like, "You want to make Robin a fox? Yeah, a fox,
He's clever
Robin,
as a fox. He's clever as a fox.
because he's clever. You see?
That's right.
Uh, right,
Sly, too.
right."
Sly as a fox.
He's like, "Don't you think making him a Robin would be a little on the nose? Huh? Huh?" I don't know if they were
Also,
worrying
he'd have
about
a
those things in
really
the 70s.
he'd have a really hard time with archery. I mean, honestly, I felt bad for him when he was dressed up as the stork because that beak. Oof.
Mm, yes. Well, as it stands, this is uh, iconic, as far as animation goes. There aren't as I said, there aren't a whole lot of great, reimaginings of what Robin Hood is, but this one absolutely nails it across the board with the telling of a story. And when I say reimaginings, there are so many quote unquote faithful adaptions to where everything is just so um okay, yeah, this is Ray meets Little John, and they're gonna have a little fight. They're married men now. Yeah, and there's a competition. It gets to be so by the numbers when you see the same story done the same way over and over again, right?
Right, right.
So when someone takes a story and sort of adds their own flavor to it, what comes to mind? Romeo and Juliet from the '90s with Leonardo DiCaprio and Claire Danes. Like, yeah, it had guns and cars and everything, but you know what? Hadn't seen that before. So, to me, and it was a banging soundtrack. Uh, I don't want to get too far off point, but the royalty involved in this is, of course, uh, Prince John and you know King Richard.
So, a great that's a great choice, and I absolutely applaud that one. I also love that movie. I think I have probably seen it no less than 50 times. At one point, I feel like we just had this on repeat for my kids because it was their favorite movie to watch. Um, but if you're interested, and this is not a movie, so veering off sort of topic a little bit, but tangentially, there is a series that was done by it was aired on PBS. I don't know who actually did it, but the series was called Robin of Sherwood. And Robin of Sherwood, if you haven't seen it, the film quality is not phenomenal, but it's still worth it to watch. It gives the story of Robin Hood a little bit more of the forest mythic culture. There is a great spirit in the forest which basically sort of gives the power of Robin Hood to whoever it is that they whoever is kind of like the most worthy. So a little bit like a Thor kind of a myth, but with very English feel to it. I think the forest guardian was named Herne. Um, and there's special swords involved, and there is all kinds of like Celtic and ruins, and it's really good, and it does exactly the opposite of what you just said, which is kind of like just retell the story of Robin Hood, like, yeah, here's this person, here's that person. This story really does kind of give a whole different dimension to Robin Hood. So Robin of Sherwood, of course, my favorite Robin Hood is the series with Toby Stevens in it, because that is just so glorious. Love that series so much. But anyway, yes. So there's a lot of good Robin Hoods. It's just they're not always told very well. I feel like that's a problem. Well, my number 7 is a movie that I had to rewatch twice. Because when I first watched it, first of all, I couldn't even believe what I was seeing. And I didn't quite get the tone right the first time. I was like, "Are you guys telling a serious story? What the heck is going on here?" It's actually a black comedy. And when I say a black comedy, I mean like the moments of things that are supposed to be levity are filled with absolute horror, in the sense that they are just oof, they're spiteful, they're mean, they're um very backstabby, and this is very much the culture, of course, so it kind of makes sense. But in this particular movie called The Favorite, came out in 2018, Rachel Weisz plays Sarah Churchill, who is the Duchess of Marlborough. And she is the number one attendant to Queen Anne. And Queen Anne is quite literally suffering from a disease that is just causing her intense pain all the time. Um, if you don't know anything about Queen Anne's life, it was incredibly horrible. Um, the backdrop is they're in 1705. Um, Great Britain is at war with France. She has a lot of advisors around her, many of whom served her husband very faithfully. She really doesn't know who to trust, and she is suffering from this debilitating, horrible disease that is just eating her away. She also suffered 17 miscarriages. 17. She had one boy who lived to be, I think, somewhere around 9 or 10, and then he died as well. So, she she was sad all the time. She was depressed. And I mean, who could blame her? And this woman, Sarah Churchill, was her handmaiden slash lover. And of course, that's kind of conjecture, but that seems like that feels like it could be true. And she is in continual competition with someone else who comes on the scene and tries to vie for that role. Her name is Abigail Hill. And she does it in so many different ways that first Sarah is super nice to Abigail, and then Abigail begins to bare her teeth a little bit, and there is an all out war between the two to basically become the favorite for Queen Anne. Interesting things happen, and I do mean very interesting things. And again, I had to watch this movie twice because, first of all, it's one of the few movies that deals with LGBTQ uh, anything in terms of royalty, which is really that makes it stand out by itself. And secondly, the performances in this movie are really good because they deal with things that are incredibly difficult to deal with, and the gravitas that they bring to the screen is really exceptional in all ways. The person who plays Queen Anne, who I want to say is Olivia Colman, I think, um, is absolutely stellar. I mean, really, really, really good. It's hard to play such a mean person, and have it come off as being anything other than kind of a caricature of itself. But she does it, and it's not that she's like always mean. It's the kind of mean that you are when you are constantly in pain, when you are constantly feeling downtrodden, or that people don't listen to you. And of course, she's the queen, so when she asserts herself, people do listen to her, but then they try to convince her that she's wrong. Welcome to being a woman still in the 21st century. But still, it is just absolutely an awesome movie. The idea that Queen Anne had these just incredible escapades with the people who were closest to her is a really great way of framing why there was kind of this war between Abigail and Sarah, and it is actually really good. I really liked it a lot. It actually I want to I know it was nominated for a number of Golden Globes, and I know that it won British Independent Film Awards. It won some BAFTA awards. It's good enough to really get notice of the award sort of circle, but it's not so artsy that regular people don't really like it. It's actually really, really relatable. So my number 7 choice is The Favorite, and my royalty in this movie is Queen Anne.
Okay, excellent, excellent choice there, Jen. As always,
Have you seen that movie?
absolutely not.
No, you have not seen that movie.
I have not seen
Uh,
that movie.
Being somebody who is kind of on a Rachel Weisz kick, uh, Rachel Weisz just brings all the everything to this movie. So if you like Rachel Weisz, you'll love this movie. She is just absolutely killer in it. Really good.
And you said it's a black comedy.
It is. Now, the thing that I think you have to walk into this understanding is that it's not presented, I don't think, from the very beginning as like, oh, this is going to be funny. It is the blackness of this is in the absolute dripping sarcasm and sardonic nature of what's happening and why it's happening. And from that, you don't walk away from this movie with like, oh, haha, that was so funny. You walk away with from this movie going, oh my god, that was so funny the way that happened. And yeah, like that. So I think you'd actually like it.
Okay, and you probably interrupted me right before I can make a really, really terrible, terrible joke.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'm saying that's probably a good thing. Probably saved me a lot of email
Hate
feedback.
mail?
Yeah, yeah. I might tell you off the air.
Okay.
Maybe I shouldn't though. But you know what? That's neither here nor there because we're talking about my number
7.
That's what I said. Um, what can I say about my number 7 other than the title of it? It's Black Knight from 2001,
Oh
starring
goodness.
Martin
I
Lawrence.
totally forgot about that movie.
You know, out of all of the retellings of uh, a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court, yes, it is that. This one is one of my favorites. Do you know why?
Time travel
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
uh I don't know. Hip hop at King Arthur.
Yes, nailed all of it. You're good. You're very good. If you're unawares of what this movie is, Martin Lawrence stars in this film. He plays a sort of a medieval, not medieval times, but like he plays. He works at a medieval theme park,
Right.
and they're about to have a rival come up. So he's cleaning the moat one day and sees something in the water, and then next thing you know, boom, 1300s England, and more or less, it's this guy, this wisecracking, street smart guy from the 21st century in ancient England. I'm not good with terminology, so
Well, King
forgive me.
King Arthur would technically be uh Dark Ages.
Okay, so Dark Ages England, where he meets King Leo,
King
who
Leo.
yeah,
Huh.
the king is Leo, and the funny thing is, that I think there's more than one point where they're like, well, he's no King Arthur, everyone just kind of like they really don't like him, so they're like, hey, let's overthrow him. So uh, Martin Lawrence's character teaches the villagers, I guess, the commoners, the townsfolk, however you want to call them. He teaches them things like football plays and wrestling moves, like pro wrestling moves, to help them, using 21st century tactics. I mean, middle school tactics, but tactics nonetheless. And it's just a fun romp where you can. And I don't always use the term, but really, it's one of those things where you kind of shut off the brain for a little while, laugh at the dumb jokes, and not regret just spending an hour and a half taking a little bit of time to enjoy yourself without having to look into anything, because uh, every time someone does that with this movie, they get reminded, yeah, but he still goes back to his old life, and he's still, technically a black man in America. So how much better could he be off after this adventure? It's like, yeah, but I didn't want to think about social issues.
Apparently, neither did they. Apparently,
No,
neither
they
did they.
didn't. But it is, for me, it was a fun movie. Watching, you know, evil royalty get their comeuppance, as is not prone to happen in real life. So enjoy this Martin Lawrence flick from the turn of the millennium, and thank me, or I'll take your hate mail too, depending on how you think of the movie. So that's my number 7, Black Knight.
Nice. I mean, as a satire of Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court, I think it's actually pretty funny. And it that movie is definitely one of those, like, just laugh out loud moments, silly laugh out loud moments, but no less funny. I consider that movie on par with Waterboy. It's just, you can't help but laugh. It's just
Mm-hmm.
funny. So yeah.
Remember Cabin Boy?
I don't remember Cabin Boy.
Oh,
Just Waterboy. Sorry.
okay.
And that's actually the only Adam Sandler movie that I will ever admit to watching ever. So you've caught me right now.
Watching or
As
liking?
yeah, okay. Unfortunately, I have seen Happy Gilmore.
Happy
For a
Gilmore's
while there,
great.
that was one of those movies that was like on repeat at my house too, much to my chagrin.
Brilliant.
Oh god.
Brilliant.
Okay. We'll debate the no, we won't. We'll just say, yeah, we'll agree to disagree on that one.
I swear
Anyway,
Jen spends more time in the sand than David Hasselhoff.
moving right along to my number 6. I chose a movie which also honestly was about King Arthur. In fact, I have 2 King Arthur movies on my list as well. This particular one came out during the, I guess, like, not the height of the pandemic, but during the pandemic. And so it kind of sort of missed its box office glory, which is really sad, because this movie was definitely made to be seen on the big screen. The bigger your TV, the better the experience you're going to have with this movie. It was meant to be seen larger than life. Um, the artistic qualities of this movie rival any of the storytelling. And I say that with the best of well, intentions isn't really the right way to say this, but I say this with the best affect. I mean, I love the storytelling in this movie, but the artistic quality of this movie had me crying in some places. The lighting choices, the color choices, the ability to transition scenes, the everything just made me so happy. I wish that I could have put this movie so much higher on my list, but the rest of the movies on my list are sort of like in this same vein, where I just find them to be so amazing, and I just couldn't put it any higher. It's called The Green Knight. The Green Knight follows the story of Sir Gawain. Now, King Arthur is a part of this story. Gawain was obviously one of the Arthurian knights, and he goes off on a quest. And the Green Knight really sort of tells a wide allegory story that is sometimes really difficult to tell. It's very hard to tell any kind of wide allegorical story if you don't kind of have a lot of heavy dialogue involved, and the Green Knight does not. Um, there's a lot of things that happen in this movie, but there isn't a lot of heavy dialogue. And so as a result, you have to look at the cues that are happening on the screen. You need to watch for the things that are happening in truly in the show don't tell kind of way. And that sort of sets it apart from a lot of other movies. But the thing that I think is the most amazing about The Green Knight is the Green Knight sort of marries together a classic Arthurian story with not just modern storytelling techniques, but it graduates us up into something a little bit more. Um, I really admire movies that can test the courage of the character, but also send a message to the audience about what that test of courage means and what it doesn't mean, also. And because the true nature of judging someone's character has a lot to do with how that person not just comports themselves in public, but what they do in private as well. And it kind of gives us that behind the peak scene or scenes about what his character really was all about, how much he suffered, what he experiences all throughout. The I'm was actually really surprised that more people didn't like this movie, but I feel like part of the reason that it didn't get as many, public accolades, like people that just have seen it, not from critics, is that people didn't either understand it, or, and I know a lot of people actually didn't see it. Again, it happened at the during the time of the pandemic, and I feel like a lot of people didn't invest a lot of resources into seeking out, movies on demand and things like that. I know that it's available now, on streaming, and it's absolutely worth watching. um it the Well, let me go back to the story first before I start singing all of the praises for cinematography and music. Um, the story itself is is it's different from most stories. It's based off of a 14th century poem. And the 14th century poem called Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is it's a difficult story to tell. It in prose, I think sometimes even harder to sort of understand. But it's one of those stories that sort of is like, okay, well, here's your trials. Here's what you are being asked to do. Now, can you rise to that challenge? And if we think about who Gawain was in terms of which knight of the round table he was, Gawain was supposed to be, one of the knights that sort of championed the lesser of us all. Gawain was supposed to be one of the knights who also at the same time was a bit vain, had some very distinct flaws of man, and they kind of come out in the film, but they come out in the film in all of these great, crazy little tests that are being put to him, and whether he succeeds or fails kind of sets him up for whatever the next test is. It's so interesting. There's a lot that goes on here. There are parts that, sort of deal with the effects of motherhood on a child. And even when that child grows up and becomes a knight of the round table, it still affects him. Um, there there's also this sort of odd situation where his mom basically does the magic right that brings the Green Knight into existence, or in existence into the court, and says, any knight who can land a blow on him will win the green axe, but has to travel to the Green Chapel to receive an equal blow in return on the following Christmas Day. And so Gawain says, absolutely, the knight finally does yield. Gawain decapitates him completely. The knight rises. He takes his head and he repeats the date that Gawain must now be at the chapel. And now he's just decapitated this guy, right? So during the entire film, we're going to wonder, well, is he going to be decapitated at the end? What blow is he going to get in return? And what happens to him? And then his mom uh gives him um this green a girdle thing, right? Not the girdle like, you wear a girdle, not like that kind, but old fashioned type of word for girdle. And she says, as long as he's wearing it, nothing can hurt him. And so the there's also that aspect of it, which is like, okay, well, how much does he need to rely on this supernatural talisman to keep him safe, and how much can he use his own skill for? Those things are tested. At one point, I think not loses it, but it gets taken away from him, and so he doesn't have that anymore. Um, he a bunch of other things, I guess, that I won't kind of get into because it starts to give away too much of the movie. But by the end of the movie, when the Green Knight swings the axe, that's, I think, when we understand the true nature of this challenge and what it was supposed to be. That actually, I feel like, is phenomenal. It just says everything that you need to know about what will transpire during the movie. You know what happens at the beginning. Now you know what happens at the end, but you don't know the outcome of what happens at the end. And everything that happens in between is sort of just that journey of becoming the knight that needs to take that reciprocating blow. So my number 6 choice is the Green Knight. The royalty is King Arthur. Before I let this movie go, I have to say that the cinematography in this movie is some of the best cinematography that I have seen in the past 10 years. Truly, it is absolutely astounding. The color choices are unbelievably well done, but you can tell that someone who was looking through the lens of that camera knew exactly what to look for and lined up shots to make the most beautiful music visually in this presentation. So, movie The Green Knight, royalty King Arthur, my number 6 choice.
Do you think my Black Knight could beat your Green Knight in a fight?
I absolutely don't think so, because the Green Knight is 100% supernatural, and hood knowledge is probably not going to get you out of that. As good as it is, it's not going to get you out of this supernatural conundrum. The Green Knight literally picks up his head after being beheaded and walks out of the king's chamber. So I don't think that. Yeah, no, I don't think so. Sorry, no, no football uh, moves are going to help you with this guy. He's gonna. He's definitely going to be the better.
It was worth a shot. So where are we at?
We are at your number 6.
My number 6, the last stop before the top 5.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so excited about the top 5.
Well, can you be excited a little bit for my number 6?
I am excited about your number 6. So far, your list has been really awesome.
I love and hate the fact that you're absolutely amazed by this.
I am. This is a great list.
Well, my number 6 is one that if you were alive at the time, this was probably the first thing that came to your mind if you think like me. Because when you announced the topic, this is absolutely the first movie that came to mind. And it is 1991's King Ralph.
That King Ralph. Oh my god.
Of course, I thought of King Ralph. One, I love John Goodman. John Goodman is amazing every time his face is on screen. Ever, period. He's the reason why I still love watching The Connors. And I mean, no offense to the rest of the cast, but John Goodman, come on, he's the reason I like. Yeah, I'm the guy that likes Blues Brothers 2000. Me, sue me. No, don't do that. What is King Ralph? Well, it's it's a movie, but in this particular film, about royals, there's a freak accident outside Buckingham Palace that basically leaves everybody, oh, what's the word? Dead. All of them. The entire royal family. Just done. And the whole royal thing suddenly in danger because you know the monarchy has bit the dust. All of the heirs have died, and they have nobody to coronate as a new monarch until somebody does some digging and finds this guy in Las Vegas named Ralph, and they find out that his grandmother had a little fling with the first Duke of Warren while she was a waitress at a hotel, and thus the royal bloodline continued. They track down Ralph, take him to London, of course, and basically they sort of have to sell him that, hey, buddy, you're the new king of England, and of course this is all supposed to be this great fish out of water story where this American is not only told that he now has to be British, but he has to be British royalty. And that, of course, involves behaving in a certain manner, consorting with a certain type, and definitely not hanging out at strip clubs anymore. So, John Goodman playing typical American Ralph definitely breaks all of these rules and sort of falls in love with an escort. Not an escort. She's a dancer, but he still falls in love with her nonetheless. And she kind of starts getting paid to ruin his chances of becoming king. After all, you can't have a buffoon, get the crown, right? Right?
Right.
Not passing judgment anywhere. So that's basically the story in a nutshell about how Ralph becomes king of England, even though he is just this this lounge singer from Vegas. Yeah, it's funny. It's John Goodman, sort of during his. I'd say that in the early '90s there was definitely a heyday for John Goodman with movies like this, Arachnophobia, um, The Babe. Not to be confused with the pig. It's it's a different thing. Babe Ruth. He played Babe Ruth. All of those are kind of guilty-ish pleasure. I don't believe in guilty pleasures, but they're kind of out there. As far as quality goes. So you just kind of have to be into John Goodman more than anything, and I am. So whenever he is in something, I am. And I guess you could say the Big Lebowski kind of falls at the tail end of that, even though he's not a lead in that. He's still, it's sort of the tail end of the Goodman good years. Yeah, can we coin that? Can can we can we get that on a T-shirt? The
Sounds
Goodman
right.
good years. I think that would be pretty rad. So, King Ralph, funny movie. I'm not going to tell you what happens at the end. Just know that it's a typical early '90s sort of comedy slash slight rom com about average schlub becoming British royalty, and that's why it's my number six.
Nice. That was a good choice. I've seen that movie once, and it's pretty entertaining. It's actually pretty entertaining. I like John Goodman too.
Yeah, it's not one of those things that I admittedly it's not something you're going to watch over and over and over and over and over and over again. I believe the last time I saw it was in 1991, so it did leave an impression. I just, you know, I synced it already, so I'm good.
Okay. My number 5. Uh this movie this movie is a movie that I watched when I was like way too young. I should not have seen this movie. Because I mostly because I got fixated. I'll just be totally honest. I got totally fixated on the one sex scene in this movie, and it just sort of like stuck in my mind and would not leave. Um and it shouldn't have stuck in my mind, but what can I say? I was young, and it just was like, yeah. And I can even remember my dad going, "Okay, this is a rated R movie, but I think, do you think you're old enough to watch it?" Because I mean, he was my dad, right? Whatever. What are ratings anyway? Um, okay, but and so I only saw it then at that time, and was obviously kind of smitten with it. But then, as I was going through high school, I saw this movie again as a part of a study on the way that we think about the Middle Ages in film. And, obviously, King Arthur is not a Middle Ages. King Arthur is Dark Ages and before the time of real Anglo-Saxon, even England, before 1066, before Harold and the Battle of Hastings. I mean, like, we're talking way back when. This particular story is supposed to be based on the Arthurian romance La Morte d'Arthur by Thomas Mallory. And if you've never read Thomas Mallory, whew, boy, you're in for a very long slog, because it is kind of written in the way that a lot of people have trouble with the Canterbury Tales. There's a lot of Middle English in it. There's a lot of language that is hard to parse. Glorious and beautiful, but hard to parse. It's also really long. Um, so Excalibur which is the name of the movie, Excalibur, released in 1981, tries to condense basically Thomas Mallory into a movie. And the movie is long. It was long enough that it actually needed an intermission in it at the time. Now, just this put this into perspective. The runtime of this movie was 141 minutes. Okay. And maybe that doesn't sound like a lot, because let's just say that the runtime for some of our favorite superhero movies is decidedly longer. And I think that sometimes we forget the noble origins of are movie runtimes, that they used to be incredibly short and concise, very concise. But if we look at Endgame was 181 minutes. And although that, even to me, that felt long, it certainly didn't feel like it was unexpected. But Excalibur, they broke it up so that there could be an intermission in the theater where audiences could get up, stretch their legs, and then come back, and then they would show the second part. So that just in and of itself tells you something about the epic nature of this particular movie. Okay, so what does Excalibur actually tell us? Well, it tells the story of King Arthur, who in the very beginning is young King Arthur. In fact, it kind of gives us the one thing that I got fixated on, the sex scene where Uther actually makes King Arthur. And it also tells us the story of how Excalibur came into being, which is kind of neat. I like the, vagueness of that story, but it's just sort of fun. There's the whole Lady of the Lake. And no, she's not a watery tart lying in ponds distributing swords. That's a Monty Python skit. This is definitely the regal Lady of the Lake, giving kingly swords to kingly men who deserve them. Um, there is an epicness to this particular movie, which I think has a lot to do with both the cinematography and the filter use, but also the incredible soundtrack that goes along with it. The soundtrack is absolutely gorgeous, and it's symphonic in so many ways. The movie was directed by John Boorman, and it stars Nigel Terry, Helen Mirren, Nicholas Clay, Liam Neeson is in it. So is Patrick Stewart, young Patrick Stewart, like baby Patrick Stewart. Um, and it's beautifully done. The central part of Excalibur really tells the story of Lancelot and Guinevere, how King Arthur gets to the throne, the generalized understanding of what Camelot is, and then the search for the Grail, which is brought on by Mordred, Arthur's son, and his rivalry with his sister, Morgane. Now, the idea, it's actually, she's called Morgana in the film. It's the idea behind Excalibur is uh, it's just pure fantasy. And it's not really Thomas Mallory fantasy. It's just like a take on Thomas Mallory and what this might look like. Because if you read Thomas Mallory, you don't actually get a lot of this as much as you get it's a lot drier. It's a lot more boring, I guess. Um this movie seeks to take out all of that and give us everything without flinching, including an incestuous relationship between Arthur and Morgana at some point. And as simplistic and as quick as those things happen, I remember them being absolutely like, whoa, I can't believe that just happened. There is the excellent understanding that this movie gives us about how, when King Arthur is doing his best, the land thrives and the people thrive and everything goes well. But the moment that he makes his really bad decision and is has given up Excalibur, basically because he finds out that Guinevere and Lancelot are having an affair, everything falls apart. The land falls apart, crops fail, people are suffering, the world is falling to ruin. And it takes the Grail quest for them to find what has been lost, which really is just, basically King Arthur's ability to have faith in himself. It's kind of an interesting allegory altogether. But one of the other things that I love about this is the magical presence between Merlin and Morgana. It's so, I mean, it was done in the early 80s. And so, there tends to be this almost forced sexuality between the two of them, which sometimes it doesn't always age well, but it was definitely an iconic representation of the time. And I'm talking about of the time during the early 1980s. Um, and it doesn't feel like super out of place. It just doesn't feel like maybe that's the way it really needed to go. And it kind of makes you question the character of Merlin and what sort of his motivation was. But at the same time, I do feel like it sets up Morgana to be an absolute just badass character who really holds her own against the entire kingdom of Camelot. I love this movie on every level. Um, and again, if I go to the cinematography in this particular movie is, it's so well composed. Every shot is so well composed that there are certain shots which feel intensely like they just belong in a storybook. Um, there isn't a lot of CGI in this movie because this is in the time really before well done CGI. Special effects are still traveling mad, and sort of tricks of the trade, very on film or overly simplistic tricks to use in film. And as a result, some things that I feel like we expect to jump off the screen to us don't, and are all done by practical effects. But in other ways, it is those very practical effects which make this movie feel as visceral and as um, earthy as it really should be. So I highly recommend Excalibur, done in 1981. I absolutely love this Grail story, and I really love the idea of how they portrayed the Lady of the Lake being truly just the Lady of the Lake that is the keeper of Excalibur. It's really 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 excellent. And when you're ready to move on to an Avalon story, contact me. I will give you an Avalon story, and we'll go from there. But for now, number 5, Excalibur, and my monarch is King Arthur.
Hmm. Hmm. It looks like we might have something in common.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Could
because
it have something to do with Anal Noctra and the charm of making? Could it possibly have something to do with that?
I don't know what you just said, little kid,
Oh
but you
gosh,
touched my
okay.
heart.
I love the charm of making. That was like one of my favorite. I used to walk around the house saying that all the time. And then I can remember stupidly trying to puff on one of my cousin's cigarettes just so that I could make the smoke come out of my mouth. And let me tell you, that was a bad choice.
Yes, yes, that was a bad choice.
But that's how dedicated to the part I was. I needed to have the
Hmm.
smoke come out of my mouth. So, yeah.
Dedication's not bad though. Conundrum.
I guess it was better than putting dry ice in my mouth, which probably would have been decidedly worse.
Hmm. Hmm. Agreed. That would have been much worse. I don't know why it took me so long to come to that conclusion. Would you like
Oh
to know
boy.
my number 5 and why
I
it's a
would
crossover?
love to know what your number 5 is and why is it a crossover?
Because I have decided. Well, I decided it a while ago. It's on my list. It's been there for a minute. My number 5 also has to do with this king named Arthur, but it's a prequel to your movie.
Oh, really?
Yes, it's my head canon, and you can't change that.
Okay.
We're talking about when Arthur was but a boy, and he
Did he go fishing? I mean, did he go not fishing? Did he turn into a fish?
maybe.
This is also one of my favorites.
Okay, I'm taking too long to get to the point here. My number 5 is 1963's Sword in the Stone.
I knew it. Yay, good movie. Good movie.
When it comes to royalty and, you know, deciding royalty, nothing comes close to the person that can pull a sword from a rock. That's how monarchs should be declared. And that's what happens because, well, a sword got pulled from a stone. Boom, that's the movie. The end. Number 5. Okay, fine. The story of the Sword and Stone isn't so much about the rise of Arthur and whatnot. It's really about think Back to the Future, except before, of course, Back to the Future was a thing. Cross that over with, say, Aladdin. I think that's a good crossover.
Yeah.
And imagine, it's about Merlin kind of mentoring Arthur to be the person he needs to be to properly rule, including wacky adventures, turning into things, uh, doing all of this lovely stuff with some excellent animation, especially for 1963. But I'm not really sure what the most memorable thing about this would be because it's full
The
of
the
really
Wizard's
awesome
Duel, of
moments.
course. The Wizard's Duel.
Yeah,
2 dragons fighting it out. Come on. That
well,
is epic.
you have a bias towards dragons
A little bit.
and
Yes, that is
ships,
true.
so
That is also true.
the only thing this could have been better is if the dragons were like captaining flying ships, you know.
Okay, but that's
Um,
another story. That's His Majesty's Dragon. So we'll get into that on a Storyteller Power Hour someday. That
but
exists, by the way.
if you're just in for a whimsical, fun time, we've talked about the Sword in the Stone before. I don't really need to bust out all of the glorious details, but it's a whimsical tale, fun for the whole family. It's my number 5 because it is just um, not so much. Oh, it's monarchy. Yeah, that's the list, and this does fulfill that requirement. But most of all, it's just as I said, uh, it's full of whimsicality.
It's full of whimsicality. They call him Wart in this movie, so I mean, he's a little bit removed from actually being the ruling King Arthur by a little bit, just a little bit. I think my favorite part of the Sword of the Stone, other than the dueling dragons, which is always great,
Mm-hmm.
um, are the lessons that Merlin tries to teach Arthur in a way that clearly defies the time that they're in. You know, he's trying to teach Arthur philosophical ideas that exist in a time when they don't exist. And I kind of love that because it does sort of make you kind of wonder, how do when we look back at these tales, how do we see them? Just as sort of like a quick note, because now we're through at least my King Arthur stuff. Um, I did this very long exploration into all of the different ways that we tell King Arthur and how King Arthur is kind of a bellwether for our understanding of the world around us. We continue to retell the King Arthur story in all of its cycles, but we always add things that kind of work for us today. So at the time when we had like a lot of, the real story of, we had tons of those movies that came out. There was King Arthur with Clive Owen and Keira Knightley, and we kind of turned it into a little bit of a reality show, where it was like, oh, this is the gritty real story of what King Arthur, and then we added in stuff that really didn't exist, and we made things sort of fit that narrative. And I feel like every time we retell a King Arthur story, we get to that. But The Sword and the Stone goes in a totally different direction, and it tells the story of the mentorship that Merlin had with young Arthur, which I feel like is such an underrated area of exploration. And the Sword and the Stone is kind of one of the few movies that really does it. I know there's a couple more, but that's one of the few that really get it across. What does it mean if you love somebody but it's unrequited? Setting up the Lancelot and Guinevere story. What does it mean if, you are the bigger fish in the pond? How do you figure out when somebody's trying to bully you? What do you do? And like, I love those lessons because they're not just good lessons for the King Arthur cycle, they're good lessons for everybody. So excellent choice. Super excellent. um would you like to know what my number 4 is?
More than anything,
I kind of wonder if you've seen this movie or if you know what this story is. Have you ever seen an adaptation of A Man for All Seasons?
the answer is of course no.
Really? You haven't seen it at all?
No.
You've never seen it done as a play?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Well, there's 2 versions of A Man for All Seasons. I chose the well, okay. Guess I'm gonna say it this way. Um, I chose to go with the more recent one. And the reason that I chose to go with the more recent one is because I feel like it has a little bit more audience reach. That is, I think people will understand it a little bit more than the 1966 version, which is more of a faithful recreation of the play itself. And so things sort of maybe don't quite add up the way that I think that they do in the movie. In the movie that was done in 1988, Henry is larger than life. He's larger than life in the other version too, but in this one, you really feel like he is absolutely larger than life. Now, the 1988 version of A Man for All Seasons is, I think, one of the kind of coolest adaptations that was made for this movie and for movies like it, because around the same time some other movies were made kind of like this. It's about Thomas More and Henry VIII, and this is kind of a classic story. Everybody likes to tell the story of Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, or Henry VIII and his war with the Church of with the Holy Roman Catholic Church, and those are good stories. They are definitely worthy of telling. But the more intimate story of King Henry and Thomas More are it's a very intricate story, and it requires a little bit of nuance to kind of get through, because Thomas More was functioned for Henry like his conscience. And I'm going to get to another movie in a little bit that also serves very similarly to this, which kind of, brings me to a bit of a theme with royalty in terms of how we perceive royalty, I should say. But this particular movie stars Charlton Heston, who obviously was a very famous person. It also has Vanessa Redgrave, who was also extremely prolific during this time. There is a Thomas Woolery, who is the cardinal. There's Henry VIII, who is Richard Johnson. Um, no, I'm sorry. There's Martin Chamberlain, who is that didn't sound right. It's Martin Chamberlain, who's Henry VIII. And then there's a man named Richard Johnson, who is the Duke of Norfolk, who is supposed to be Thomas Howard. So if you know any of these people, then you'll know what that story is all about. But if you don't know what the story is about, let's just say that this is the story of how the common man sort of became seen through the eyes of the monarchy. And it's quite fascinating. Um, there's so much in this particular movie that makes you kind of almost opine for more of what is really there. And the struggle between Henry VIII and Thomas More is it's about principle, but it's about more than principle. It's about a kind of philosophy in life which I think we can all relate to today, something that deals with, what is our immediate need versus our long standing understanding of morality, and how do we make those two align with each other. Um, I, I i love a lot of stories with Henry VIII because we tell them almost like King Arthur stories, where there are just so many cycles of telling the story of Henry VIII. His life was definitely a bit more bombastic than most monarchs, um, but also the people around him, the people that were in his orbit, really made a difference in the long-standing history of England. And among them definitely was Thomas More. I think that this movie it's worth watching in both iterations. It is worth watching the 1966 version, but it's probably better to watch the 1988 version first, so that you get really good understanding of what is being said, and then go back and watch the 1966 version. The 1966 version, I believe, is in black and white, and this version, the 1988 version, is not. So I definitely highly suggest it. It's, if for nothing else than to hear the soliloquies, which Henry VIII and Thomas More have. It feels like a play that you're watching as a movie, but you get all of that really good feeling like you're watching a really good drama. I have to say I really love this. I think one of the other major things that I love about this movie, which I forgot to say, is I love the idea that the law is the law. In other words, like, because it's not democracy. Obviously, the royalty is not democracy. So the idea that you can bend the law in order to fit your own needs is something that they all grapple with and that they all sort of have to come to terms with. And I love that because it just sets up so many different philosophical questions, and this idea of being sort of entitled to changing the law simply because you are at the head of the state sort of gives me a lot of really, good sort of, again, philosophical pivot points to be thinking on and always discussing. And despite the fact that this play was written many, many, many years ago, it feels very relevant today. Like there's a lot in here that we are still grappling with today. So I chose A Man for All Seasons as my number 4.
All right. And even though I already said I haven't seen it, it still sounds like a very interesting selection.
It's a great, great movie. It's definitely it's one of those movies that if you have not seen A Man for All Seasons, you will be richer for just your own experience after watching it. It's definitely a play or a movie that everybody should at some point see, because it's one of those like morality sort of, it's a moment that feels like it's more important than anything that the film. It's not just the film, it's the ideas in the film that are really good. And I know that this is part of the uh um I think it's part of the MGM world. It might be on Turner Classic.
Well, let's see. A Man for All Seasons. Sounded like Superintendent Chalmers for a second. Skinner. Let's see. That does not have it available to watch on anything that I have.
Oh, that's sad.
Not even to stream on Amazon. Weird.
Oh, that is sad. We'll have to send a letter over to Turner Classic and see if we can get them to
Get
put it back
this
on.
movie.
I thought for sure it would be available on HBO Max because they have a lot of the catalog for Turner, but I don't know. HBO Max is turning into Max, everybody. So get ready for content
6
reduction.
days. 6 days.
Catalog reduction is definitely going to be a part of. I mean, it's going to be catalog reduction in some places and then catalog explosion in other places where we have all of the Discovery stuff that is basically just, you know, not stuff that I want to watch, but
Finally, I can watch all of Deadliest Catch.
I'm really excited. Yeah, no, I'm not even gonna say I'm really excited because I'm just not that excited at all. I know that people love reality TV. I know that people love, real life sort of docudramas and stuff, and I know that that is a thing. And I do not mean to demean or make fun of anybody's love for whatever it is that their entertainment choices are. But God, I just feel like it's nails on the chalkboard watching some of those shows. I just can't.
Well, while Jen couldn't fathom why anybody would watch reality TV, Josh is staring blankly at his list, wondering, will his number 4 be worth talking about?
Of course, it's worth talking about.
Hey,
Even if it's
I'm
not
the
good, it's worth
narrator.
talking
You're not
about.
supposed to be able to hear me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize the Greek chorus was speaking. I'm so sorry. Go
No,
ahead.
the narrator from a Discovery Channel reality show.
See, that's how little I know about. Okay, this just proves the point completely.
I was just
So,
trying to help our audience transition to a new HBO.
uh, listen, when HBO decides to drop a check for us, then we'll extol the virtues of Max versus HBO Max. Until then, you're out of luck, guys.
You heard that, Max? Sponsor
I
us.
feel. Honestly, I feel like I'm calling like my neighbor down the street. Hey, Max.
If you send some cameras and some green screens, I'm sure we could put together a nice little, Max original programming reality. And guess what? It takes 0 writers to do this. Well, technically, we're
True.
both writers, but I don't think you're. Yeah.
I do belong to the WGA, so I
Hmm.
wouldn't be able to write anything specific, but maybe by then the writer strike will be over and we'll all be good. We'll see.
It's like, wow, the TV version of 1021 isn't as good because all Jen says is, movie was good.
Well, see, what saves me is I don't write this out ahead of time. It's just all freeform. So we're good because improv is not actually included. And I think I should be okay. I'm not actually doing this in the capacity of a writer, I'm just a critic.
Fair enough. But just remember, to everybody listening, solidarity, WJ.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Speaking of which, you started off your list with Downton Abbey at your number 10.
I did.
And you said it was a movie more about preparing for the royalty to get there, yes?
Yes, indeed.
Well, my number 4, yes. My number 4 is also about that.
Ooh.
And it is Downton. It's
Chapel. Not Downton Abbey, but Downton Chapel.
no, I was gonna say uh you know what, never mind. Never mind.
It's Downton Detroit. Oh no, wait, that's downtown Detroit. Oops,
Yes, I
sorry.
was
Yeah.
gonna go along the lines of that kind of joke. And then it just kind of flew off the rails in my brain as it was happening. Yeah,
Those are the best.
did you hear the screeching? That was my brain derailing in real time.
Those are
Uh,
truly the best.
so uh, to make a long story slightly longer, my number 4 is The Naked Gun from the Files of Police Squad.
Oh, that's right, the Queen.
The whole movie is about a plot to assassinate Queen Elizabeth
That's right.
and how Frank Drebin has to save her.
You know,
Yeah,
I'm not a
that's
big
the movie.
slapstick fan, but I gotta say, those movies, they make me happy. I love those movies.
There's something about and unfortunately it doesn't really translate after the Naked Gun series, um, because yeah, there was like a golden era of spoof movies, right?
Right.
With Leslie Nielsen especially. Um, I mean, surely you agree.
Don't call me Shirley. But yes, I do agree.
Naked Gun is was um, another great notch in that belt of spoof
Yeah.
comedy. Unfortunately, afterwards, maybe it's just me, but I wasn't really into Dracula Dead and Loving It.
No, me neither. Yeah, it kind of lost its mojo after Naked Gun.
But the Naked Gun from the Files of Police Squad itself was it's a laugh out loud joyride
It is.
as you watch Frank kind of stumble and bumble his way all throughout this mystery of who is going to assassinate the queen and why. And of course, how is actually another very interesting part. You get wonderful moments like Frank singing the national anthem,
Oh my god.
Frank saving the queen at a big dinner, which leads to, we'll say, a national embarrassment.
I was just gonna say an international incident.
And there's some football guy in here that, well, we won't mention that. George Kennedy uh, does a wonderful job in this film as well. He's not really known for comedy, George Kennedy, but in the Naked Gun movies, I'd say he kind of crushes it.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm kind of running out of gas here because what can I say other than the Naked Gun movies are great, absolutely hilarious. Frank has to save Queen Elizabeth. Boom, that's the royalty connection. It's just so much fun, and I just recommend uh, everybody get a chance to check it out, so you can see, you know, um, well, this line will make sense. No, Frank, they're here for Weird Al.
The, there is something about the deadpan humor in all of those movies, but in Naked Gun as well, which is just, it is so hard at this point to recreate that. I haven't seen very many movies do it successfully, and they get a big tip of the hat for that because it is really done well. It, like you said, it is just absolutely laugh out loud. I really enjoy those movies. I enjoy watching them not just one time but many times because it's still funny. It doesn't lose any of its luster just because you've seen it before. So good
And
choice.
it follows a fun sequel convention.
Yes. Yes.
Naked Gun is followed by Naked Gun 2.5, which is followed by Naked Gun 33 and a third.
Which is also pretty funny. I actually kind of like that one too.
There's not a bad Naked Gun movie. Well,
Well,
there's not an unenjoyable Naked Gun movie.
true. Very true. Well, there's no guns in my next movie choice. But there is a person who, despite the fact that they do not belong in this particular time period, ends up being in this time period. They are sort of like the common everyday person, but they are the modern common everyday person, and they are about to tell us the story of Henry V. Henry V stars Kenneth Branagh. Um, it also was directed by Kenneth Branagh, and the screenplay was by dun 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 Kenneth Branagh. This movie, which I feel like I have talked about before, although I don't know in what capacity. Oh, I know, it was on the one about the directors turned actors, right? Wasn't it? Didn't I choose Kenneth Branagh, or did I not choose him? I can't remember now. I did. But I chose Kenneth Branagh for Thor. I thought about him for Henry V. Um, Kenneth Branagh in this particular movie is stunning, truly stunning. The movie opens, and like I said, there is a person who is dressed in contemporary dress, and they are basically what I was saying before when I was mocking the Greek chorus. They are the Greek chorus, right? They are the narrators, the muses, if you will, that tell us the story of what is happening. Now they appear a couple of times during the film, but honestly, the um the times that they appear in the film don't necessarily uh kind of undo any of the action drama that is being done. The story is told in 5 acts, and if you didn't know, Henry V is it's a Shakespeare play, and it tells the story of how Henry gets his crown. It's very contentious. It explains a bit about how Henry Henry is persuaded basically to declare war on France, and how the idea of the campaign into France is born. And this is at a time when things are extremely complicated between England and France. It is the 15th century, early 15th century, and there have never been more contentious times between England and France. I mean, there will be more contentious times between England and France, but this happens to be one of those sort of pivotal moments in history. And there's a lot of competing claims to certain places. D- these are really old established ideas of, who owns what demesnes, and where and how property is distributed, and, laws of primogeniture and things like that, which really create these just intense experiences for the people that are living at this time, and especially the people who are in governance. So, uh, the I think that the most amazing thing about Henry V, first of all, the language in this, it's taken directly from Shakespeare. So you hear a lot of Shakespearean affect. And everybody brings their A game. I mean, this is not a movie that you can mess around with when it comes to sticking diction, when it comes to enunciation in just absolute perfection, and where everything that you enunciate must be done in the right fashion in order to maintain the style of Shakespeare. And they, like I said, they all bring their A game. It's absolutely wonderful. The movie stars, or has in it, I guess you could say stars. Ian Holm, who we all know and love, and love especially for being part of Hobbit series. Emma Thompson, Judy Dench, amazing. And even Christian Bale is in this movie. Paul Scofield is also in this movie. There's a whole lot of characters in this movie. There is a ton of action sequences. Henry V, and I'm not a big battle person, so I'm not like a huge person to go and play Call of Duty or even World of Warcraft, although I have and past. I'm not a huge fan of any of that. I'm also not a huge fan of battle sequences in movies necessarily, unless they're like, yeah, okay, we really need these. And because sometimes I feel like they're just superfluous, and they just kind of fit sort of a desired component for male energy. And I don't know if we actually need it, but I am going to throw all of that out the window with yesterday's lunch. And I'm going to say, the battle sequences in Henry V are absolutely spectacular. I mean, I run out of words that, kind of act as superlatives, because in this movie, everything lines up so well. There is a grittiness to the existence in this movie, which you feel the energy, you feel the drained energy, you feel the confusion, you feel the sadness, you feel the moments where defeat feels like it's just going to crush everyone, and you feel for Henry his bone soul crushing need to win this. um it's really unbelievably well acted. There is also something about this movie that makes me, I won't say it makes me happy, but it makes me feel like somebody really did their homework. When Henry is giving his speech to the troops, right? It's supposed to be this big morale lifting speech. He does it in a way that makes me I feel as a person, I feel like I would have been inspired by that speech, and I absolutely love it. Just feels gorgeous. Like, okay, I didn't really want to fight, but now, yeah, I'll totally come with you, Henry. Absolutely. There's just something that jumps out of the screen to me in that particular speech that is just wonderful. I also feel like the battle between, this is just more of a metaphoric battle, but the battle for power between Henry and the French is something that is, you know, we if you know what the Battle of Agincourt is, then you know what why this is so pivotal and what this sets up in history. But in 1415, this battle was absolutely pivotal, just pivotal. And what ends up happening is, look, the English army is completely outnumbered. Like in a way that is sort of, if you showed up with your, two homeboys and there were an entire legion of people that were like, yeah, okay, come bring it. And what do you do? And it's amazing that even at that time they come up with ways to basically trick the French into surrendering. And I don't mean that it's not like a trick, but it's more like a um they give up, they completely get rid of some codes of conduct which basically were under the laws of chivalry at the time, and they through that are able to win. In any event, I'm getting too far off topic, but the movie itself just follows this unbelievable period of time, which is historically really important, but also has all of the Shakespearean importance and just so much gravitas going on here. It's really effective. It's wonderful. Kenneth Branagh gets my, I don't know. I adore this man for being able to bring forth this vision in such a way that captures not just a moment in time, but a moment in time based on a play, which is very important anyway, just because of who wrote it and what it sort of says about monarchies and disputes, and it gives us performances of an absolute lifetime. So Henry V, I will stop waxing poetic, gets my number three choice, and obviously the monarch in this is Henry V.
Brava, brava.
I love this movie so much.
You do? I couldn't
I
tell.
God, I love this movie. I mean, this is one of those movies that, like, when I saw it, I actually saw it at a screening for, this is how nerdy I am. I went to an SCA, uh, Society for Creative Anachronisms. I went to a meet, and they were doing an outdoor theater that night, and I was like, oh, this could be fun. So I watched this movie with them, and I think there was also something about being around people that were also like so into it, and it just made me feel like, oh my gosh, this is crazy good. How amazing is Kenneth Branagh that he was able to bring this all to life? I mean, it just, as somebody who recognizes um the difficulty in doing proper adaptations, he just nailed it. He totally nailed it. And it's not easy to nail a Shakespeare adaptation. It's hard. This is not easy stuff. So I give him a lot of credit for it.
Is it safe?
It's safe. You can move into your number three choice. But also, it's never safe. Just, you know,
Yeah,
it's
that's
safe for the
fair.
moment. It's kind of never safe.
That's fair. I'm glad to hear you so passionate about uh, something. You know, it's been a while since you really sank your teeth into uh, something like this, and it's really good to hear.
Well, let's not forget that, I mean, if you don't know anything else about me, my area of passion is the Middle Ages, including, let's say 800, which is doesn't technically begin the Middle Ages, but from about 800 to about 1550 or so. That time span is something that I have spent my entire lifetime digging into, like reading stuff that most people would consider to be boring text, like, medieval economy in the West. I love that stuff. And so when I see entertainment, when I see movies that represent this, I do get really excited about it, because I feel like this is my love. This is my, everybody's got their sort of like one niche. This is my Kevin Smith. Anything that is related to the Middle Ages, even if it's terrible, I will still watch it because that's how much I love it. So,
Well, my number three is a continuation of my passion.
is it a Goofy movie?
No,
Bring
I
me.
wish. No, my number three is the greatest Robin Hood story of all time.
Oh,
Do you know why this is the greatest Robin Hood story of all time?
because they wear tights.
Because, like, unlike other Robin Hoods, this one can speak with a British accent.
Oh my god, I freaking nailed it. Okay. I consider this to be a personal accomplishment, Josh. When I can guess your movies, I feel like I have, like, I don't even ask me what it is. I just feel like I've accomplished something.
It's called bonding, Jen.
That's what it is. Whew, man,
Not to be
I think we got
confused.
to spend some
Anyway,
time apart.
you're right, though. My number three is Robin Hood Men in Tights.
That's an epic
Before
movie.
Kevin Smith, before there was a Kevin Smith, there was a Mel Brooks. And talk about writer director that does absolutely amazing work. It I'm going to say it. Mel Brooks is the man. Kevin Smith is a man, a great man, but Mel Brooks is the man. And the fact that he took in 1993 Robin Hood and did his Mel Brooks stuff to it, uh, amazing, absolutely amazing. It has Carrie Elwes. It has Carrie in it.
Wesley. It has
Well, yeah.
Wesley in it.
Um, Richard Lewis, Dave Chappelle, and then it's filled with just. I mean, it has the classic Robin Hood moment. The duel between Robin and Little John. You know, over the river, right? Except it's more of a stream, and as that shoe points out, hey Robin, it ain't exactly the Mississippi. And he's like, I'm on the east side, I'm on the west side, And Little John, is telling him that they can't pass. They have to pay the toll. Because if you don't pay no toll, we don't get no rose. I wrote that myself. He's like, oh, yes. And just the fact that everybody buys in to just everything. Robin's been away for a while, and he does get astonished, by a few things, but most of the time he's just totally nonchalant, totally cool. And it's the absolutely hilarious adventure, all the way up to and including seeing things like a Patriot arrow for the competition.
Oh
You
my
got to
god, that
remember
was
this
funny.
was made in '93. It spoofs so much late 20th century life. It's too much to really kind of dig into. It's almost like it should be its own kind of thing, you know. But
Yeah, absolutely.
when you really break it down, um, we're talking about royalty in this, and of course there's Prince John, Richard Lewis, Do I have a Richard Lewis impression? Hello, hello. I'm gonna say that's pretty good.
He's a
But
good king. He's a good king.
it's good to be the king. Mel Brooks himself plays. Well, there's no Friar Tuck in this movie, but there's a Rabbi Tuckman. Um,
Oh God, so funny.
we'll bless the trees, we'll bless the flowers, we'll bless everything until we get fish naked. Uh, and then the big cameo of the time. Do you remember
You know what? Who I don't. Who is a big cameo?
when King Richard returns? It's none other than Patrick Stewart. No,
Oh
it's
right,
not
Patrick
Connery.
Stewart. Which is funny because in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, the returning King Richard is Sean Connery.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, what comes around goes around. Everybody who's been in a King Arthur or medieval romance gets a turn to play King Richard coming back from the Crusades.
So from this day henceforth, all toilets in the kingdom shall be called John's.
That was great.
Robin Hood, Men in Tights is my number 3.
Nice, really good choice and excellent movie. I very much love that movie. That also has some great zingers and one-liners. Just really love it.
And then just a word of warning when we get to my number 2. Um, yeah, I think I'm right in the right mental state. There will be a tad bit of singing involved, so you've been warned.
Oh, okay. Everybody, that's your cue to record this particular version so that you have this for posterity. Because yeah, you could, if nothing else, you can use it for blackmail later. Okay, my number 2. Oh, my number 2 is so good. My number 2 is a movie that was released in 1964. 1964 was a good year for films. It was a great year for Peter O'Toole and for Richard Burton. Richard Burton plays the very maligned and misunderstood Becket. He was the Archbishop of Canterbury. Eventually, he was Peter O'Toole, who plays King Henry II. He was his right hand man forever. In fact, he was his best bud for a long time. And they have a major falling out. Becket is named as the Archbishop of Canterbury, and then the real problems start. This particular movie is so well done. It is an incredibly well adapted screenplay. It feels a lot like a staged play, but it still maintains all of the cinematography that you expect from a movie. So it's not a play, but it has that sort of like, staged idea behind it, and I feel like that gives it a different level of storytelling, which is truly amazing. Um uh the story of Becket is one that I feel like a lot of people sort of like know on the periphery, but don't quite know exactly what it is. Um, by the time that Becket has become the Archbishop of Canterbury, Henry is having all kinds of problems, both at home politically and also with the church. And this is always a sticky wicket for the church, or I should say for England, because they get a lot of power from the church. And this is in the times obviously prior to Henry VIII, when there was the historic split and the church became not the Holy Roman Catholic Church but the Church of England, that was then superseded basically all. They cut their ties with Rome. But this is before that, and we have to sort of like remember that In these particular periods of time before that, the church, the Holy Roman Catholic Church, was absolutely essential for the power of all of the kings. Now, the other thing that is kind of important, just sort of to know about this movie, is Henry II was he was a Plantagenet king, so he was a descendant of or I shouldn't say descendant. He was the ancestor, direct descent, direct relation to to the kings we were just talking about, to King John, to King Henry, to King Richard. He and actually my number one choice is about to talk about this as well. But Henry, his life was an incredibly it was precarious. He was always sort of at war with one of the factions, either the church or his own parliament, his own, inner workings. It wasn't really actually a parliament, but his own sort of inner council, and the people. And he had so much going on. And so his friendship with Beckett was like one of those things that was the most important thing of all. It was an incredible release for him. It was an incredible camaraderie that he had. And when he lost that, I feel like history says he not just lost his way, but he was never really the same. He just really everything changed for him at that point. Um his Henry, as the man who was supposed to do so much more than he actually did, um also was a man who was contrite after he realized what he had done. So the big central plot point in Beckett, which I don't think I'll be spoiling anything if I say, but the central plot point in Beckett is that after he loses Beckett's friendship, after he becomes the Archbishop of Canterbury and basically is at war with him, he says in a sort of drunken, stammering little, I don't know, rant, will no one rid me of this nuisance, of this priest nuisance? And his knights, who are already absolutely looking for a reason to get rid of Beckett, take that as the king said we should go kill him. And they do. And they don't just kill him, they kill him in the church. They kill him in sort of like the most public and most defiling way possible. And Henry is forced to do a kind of contrition where he, has himself whipped. He, says in a statement of public confession, I did this. I killed this man. And of course, the church takes a different stand and no, you didn't kill him because actually it was your knights that killed him. They don't excommunicate Henry, but honestly, I feel like they probably would have been within their rights to do that. Still, the movie doesn't say that. The story doesn't say that. There is just this unbelievable at the end sense of, what have I done? This is terrible. This is the worst thing that I could have done. And he's right that it was the worst thing that he could have done. So the story, from the beginning to the end, narrates this incredible feat of life living with Henry. Now, one of the most interesting things about this is that Beckett takes up my number 2 spot. And I won't tell you what my number 1 spot is, but I will say that the basically the person that Henry marries after this becomes the mother of Richard and John and Henry the Young, so next Henry. And that is a tangled web of horribleness So it's almost like Beckett feels like the prequel in some ways to the movie that I'm about to say as my number one. This this is how incredibly powerful both of these movies are together. They filled my number two and my number one spot. So my number two spot is Beckett. Henry II is the monarch. And this is one of those movies, truly, I know I say this about a lot of movies, but everybody should see Beckett. It's like this is culturally a thing that is so powerful to watch. So Beckett is my number two.
Okie dokie.
I'm assuming that you haven't seen Beckett.
I have not.
I have also seen Beckett done as a play. I saw it at a cathedral in upstate New York, and it was gorgeous. There was, all of the requisite, uh, beautiful acoustics in this cathedral, but the backdrop just couldn't have been better. It was just absolutely astounding. So I feel very blessed to have seen that.
I don't know where I would watch that, but I can't wait to find out what your number one is.
I bet you could almost guess what my number one is based on my clues.
Probably not, because
Okay.
me.
Well, I'll get Steve in here and we'll get Salt and Pepper and we'll see if we can. Oh, no, wait, that's a different show. Never mind. I won't sing Blues
Uh,
Clues, but I'm excited to hear what your singing might be about. So, what's your number two?
my number two. God, I did say I was going to sing, didn't I?
Yes, you did. I mean, I'm not singing Blues Clues just so that you'll keep the spotlight. So, let's hear it. What's it going to be?
All right. It's only going to be a quick snippet, but it's definitely going to give away what it is and who the monarch is.
All right.
You'll say the films on my list are not films that you're willing to play.
Hmm.
Talking about Hamilton.
Oh, good lord. How could I not think of Hamilton?
I don't know if
Oh,
that
I
means
feel
I'm just
sad.
awful.
I
I'm
feel
terrible.
sad.
I'm an awful
Hamilton.
singer.
Man, that is actually, not that song, but the Song of King George is actually a song that I sing around the house. And I mean, people look at me really funny and everybody gives me crazy stares, but you know what? I don't care. I love that song. Usually when people leave the room, I, sing the line, "You'll be back."
Soon you'll see. You'll remember you belong to me. Uh, I mean, Jonathan Groff is a treasure,
Right?
especially when it comes to his performance as King George in Hamilton. Just the way he's every time he's on stage. I think he's on stage for a total of 9 minutes or something like that
Yeah,
throughout the entire thing.
it's
But every
short.
time he's there, he just steals the show, conks it
Yep,
over the head, and takes it with him.
totally agree.
Especially after Washington says he's not going to run for re-election, and King George is like, "Wait, you can quit? What?" And then they just have him stay on stage as the parties. By the way, they warned us. George Washington warned us against having political parties. Now he's like, "Told you so, fools."
Uh-huh.
Anyway, the fact that he gets to kind of hang around on stage while all of the arguing and bickering is going on, and the just utter joy on his face is like, ah, watching everybody just lose their minds, ironically, and it's man, whew, Jonathan Groff, dear Lord, man, you are amazing. And it's not very often that I can point to. I mean, it's not a small part by any means, but stage time, relatively speaking, it's not a lot, but he utilizes every single nanosecond that he is visible, and that is something to be admired if you're a performer or if you appreciate performances. Now, I don't think I really need to get into the whole story of Hamilton because, well, quite frankly, it's 2023. You know the story.
His name
Uh,
is Hamilton.
it's been quite ubiquitous into the zeitgeist. Look at me using words that probably mean nothing. Um, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. The point is, talking about the Royals, and when it comes to just crazy old kings, it doesn't get much more than that than King George the Third as he loses his first love. Oh, and looks like we have some comments. Kente says hi, and we should all drink tea together in honor of this episode tonight.
Or if we want it to be historically accurate, what we should do is take the tea and throw it into the nearest body of water and just kind of thumb our noses at the entire British Parliament.
You don't do that on a regular basis?
No, I don't actually do that on a regular basis. Actually, I'm very fond of drinking tea, and according to my 23andMe results, I'm actually about as English as they come. So, yeah, there's that.
It's funny because I had some results come back because of the tea I drink. Unfortunately, they said diabetes, but you know,
Those are quite different. Yeah, those
a
are
little bit,
actually
a
quite
little bit.
different.
But Hamilton is my number two, and its portrayal of King George the Third from Jonathan Groff.
Good
Exquisite.
choice. Good choice. And also, we will thank Kinte for giving us the wonderful opportunity of having Josh watch this together with us for the first time. And we got all of his wonderful reactions to Hamilton as he watched it for the first time. And it was pretty epic. It was great. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. So, fun times. Those were very fun times. Thanks, Kinte. Okay,
Number one.
we are at my number one, and I'm so excited about my number one. I can't
It's
wait to tell you.
Ghostbusters, isn't it?
It's actually not Ghostbusters.
Oh,
So yeah, I don't even know. Maybe some of the ghosts are British royalty. I don't know, but they never actually announced it, and I don't think Zool counts. So I'm gonna say probably no. Um,
he's like King Richard's fourth cousin,
Something like that.
maybe. I
Yeah,
don't know.
8,000 removed or something, but that's okay. It's all right. It's all good. Okay, my number one is a movie that I have seen many times. In fact, I was quoting this movie at a place called the Cloisters in New York City. And if you don't know what the Cloisters are, it's a museum wing of the Metropolitan Museum of Art that is located very far away from the actual Metropolitan Museum of Art in Fort Tryon, I think it is. And it's a museum that is basically just dedicated to medieval history. I am in my absolute bliss spot when I am at this museum. And I was quoting this movie as I was walking around the cloisters, and somebody who clearly also was a medieval aficionado recognized it and gave me the line back that I needed to have in order to complete it. And it just made me so happy. So I I'll tell you what this movie is, but I just love it because I feel like if you love the Middle Ages, you probably have seen this movie and we could probably have great conversations about it. It's called The Lion in Winter. Now, Henry II is played by none other than Peter O'Toole, who, if you'll remember from my number 2 spot, also played Henry II in Beckett. So when I say that it was kind of like a prequel, it wasn't intentional, but they cast Peter O'Toole to play Henry II in this role as well. And oh man, let me tell you, it is absolutely awesome. Um, and as great as Peter O'Toole is in this role as Henry II, he is completely eclipsed and overshadowed by Katharine Hepburn, who plays Eleanor of Aquitaine, who is just the most spirited of people that you could imagine. Uh, in history, we know that Eleanor of Aquitaine was absolutely a Spitfire, and she was intensely interested in not just what her family was doing and could do, but also in sort of managing the expectations of what was happening with her own land and what would be done with it by by England. Now, there was unfortunately Kinte who asks what Lord of the Rings is number one. There's no British royalty in the Lord of the Rings, but if if Aragorn had been British royalty, I of course would have picked The Return of the King as my number one because yes, that would have been amazing. But okay, so The Lion in Winter focuses on the relationship, which is this crazy dysfunctional relationship. I mean, you think your family has problems? Go watch The Lion in Winter and see how two princes who are vying for power and Henry II, who is aging and knows that he's aging and has to pick between these two crazy kids and the youngest of them. Who's going to rule England and how are they going to do it and what's going to happen? And then add in this idea of he can't really divorce his wife because that's a big no-no with the church, and we already know that he's already in hot water with the church. But he basically puts Eleanor away. He confines her to the castle where he tells her that she cannot leave. And he obviously, makes sure that she can't leave. So she's effectively a prisoner. But does that stop her from being absolutely opinionated and the best of the best when it comes to matching Henry in wit and vitriol? No, it does not. She is perfect. She matches every bit of energy that Peter O'Toole brings to the screen. And I have to say that this pairing is one of my favorite pairings of movie partnerships pretty much of all time. They feed off of each other's energy in a way that I just very rarely see. You can feel the kind of organic nature that they have between the two of them. And it's just perfect. The person who plays okay, so here's where things get really weird. The person who plays John is none other than Nigel Terry. Okay. Um and I know this is going to sound kind of silly, but Nigel Terry also played in Excalibur as none other than King Arthur. So that's sort of super awesome. We also have a young Timothy Dalton in this movie as King Philip II of France. That also was super amazing. He's great in that. And we have a very young, and I do mean very young, Anthony Hopkins playing Richard the Lionheart, who is Henry's eldest son. So we've got Anthony Hopkins, Katharine Hepburn, Peter O'Toole, Nigel Terry, and Timothy Dalton, and a bunch of other people who are phenomenal, but you probably wouldn't recognize their names. So all of this comes together in this amazing cast. The story is really the story of why Henry is so tormented. He's tormented by his children, he's tormented by his wife, but he's tormented by them in a way that is completely almost predictable because he did all of this to his family. He created all of these problems. He created the problem of having Eleanor be sort of like a prisoner in her own space because he needed to have her be prisoner. He needed to get her out of the way. He just basically is having an affair with somebody else. He cannot seem to manage on his own what he has created. He also has zero understanding of what his children are going through, and basically his children hate him enough that they think about regicide. Yeah, fun times. So all of this ends up being strategically important to England, but also family drama and theatrics, which play out in the best possible way. Again, I cannot overstate ever how unbelievable the performances of Peter O'Toole and Katharine Hepburn are in this movie. It is so worth watching simply for that, simply for the witty repartee that they have between the two of them and for their on screen chemistry, which just jumps off the screen. The sets are beautiful, true, but it's not really the sets that make or anything else that make this movie. It is truly just those performances. This movie was created with a $4 million budget, and way back in 1966, 67, I think this actually I think this movie was released in 1968. It earned 22 million off of a $4 million investment. So that's pretty good. I mean, it's done better even since, but just for its initial release, I feel like this really kind of gave us a wonderful drama piece about a time in history when, we tend to focus a little bit more on Richard or John, and we mock uh what was happening in England at that time because there was chaos and John trying to take over for Richard and Richard being off on crusade and not having a real ruler, just having the prince who was kind of like the regent in absentia. And we forget that the origins of this story deal with Henry II being the most ineffectual ruler that there was. Well, no, that's wrong. I shouldn't say that. Henry being an ineffectual ruler both in his kingdom but also with his children. The Plantagenet or Plantagenet, the Plantagenet drama is so interesting that it reads better than any soap opera that you have probably ever read. It is really, really fun and important. So, from a historical perspective, it's not really perfectly on point, but it's still an amazing adaptation and representation of that particular period in history. So, Lion in Winter, Eleanor of Aquitaine, and Henry II, they are the royalty, and whew, man, what royalty they are. So, there's my number one.
And what was the name of it?
The Lion in Winter.
In?
Yes, Lion in Winter.
Okay, there it is. Okay. 1968.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, your list for Letterboxd 1021 Pod called Jen's British Royalty is locked in and saved.
Oh, I'm so excited that I have my own British royalty. That's like super great. I'm going to start planning on taking over the world very soon.
Just be quick about it.
I'll try. Imperialism can take a while, though. Just, slow creep.
Nobody's got time for that.
Okay, well.
And I went ahead and locked in my list too. I'm sorry, I just Cat is like, what you doing? What you doing, buddy?
It's a list, kitty. It's a list.
So I'm going to start my my number one with, of course, a quote. Are you ready?
I am ready.
So when asked how he became ordained king, the king in question says, "The Lady of the Lake, her arm clad in the purest shimmering samite, held aloft Excalibur from the bosom of the water, signifying by divine providence that I, Arthur, was to carry Excalibur. That is why I am your king."
This actually, I did a quote from as well. I actually did a quote from this very skit called The Constitutional Peasant, which was the Lady of the Lake in Excalibur was not a watery tart distributing swords from ponds. So you are in good company, my friend, because that is a great movie.
Yes. Yes, it is. Talking about, of course, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, the greatest movie about royalty ever.
Well,
Well,
that's debatable, but okay. It's good.
this is not a debate show, so it's certainly not debatable here. But it is filled with wonderful, wonderful quotes that I yes, I pulled some up because, you know, it's about 11:30 in real time for those of you that are watching live. For those of you listening at home, yeah, it's late, and memories don't work so well when it's late. So I pulled up some quotes because they are so wonderful. For instance, you can't expect to wield supreme executive power just because some watery tight threw a sword at you. Beautiful, beautiful. The whole bit of them trying to explain how they operate. And Arthur's just getting incredibly indignant, saying, "Shut up!" Because
Constitutional Peasants is one of my favorites. Yes, it really is.
absolutely great. This movie also has a Black Knight.
It does.
So, two Black Knights on my list. And I'm pretty sure between the two of them, they could take down the Green Knight. Uh,
Well,
it's
if
it.
not, he can come back and bite him.
Well, you don't frighten us, English pig dogs. Yeah.
You know what I'm going to say, though, right?
What are you going to say?
I'm going to say, is there anyone else up there we could talk to?
uh,
Actually, I think my favorite skit out of this entire movie is the Killer Rabbit. I cannot watch that without absolutely cracking up. Just bringing forth the holy hand grenade, the counting, and then the scene when the rabbit actually attacks. It's just, oh my god. I
consult the
just
Book of Armaments.
I love it. I just love it. It's so funny. Ugh.
Having trusty steeds take you across the land. We're just banging coconuts together, aren't you? Again, Monty Python and the Holy Grail is one of those movies that if you start going down a rabbit hole of quoting it, you're not getting out.
Nope.
It's not going to happen. So I am going to regretfully um, force the stop and talk about the movie briefly and say it is a wonderfully absurd tale of Arthur and his knights of the roundish table. And everybody should watch this. Everybody.
I
It's on
totally
Netflix.
agree.
It's on Netflix. You can go watch it in a minute. If you have not seen Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and you want to watch some, again, I believe the only word to really use is absurdist comedy, coming from a group of sketch comics from the 70s. I mean, we're talking the precursor to, well, I'm not really sure what the equivalent of today would be, but this was pre Whitest Kids, pre Kids in the Hall. These were the guys that mastered the comedy troupe in sketch format. They're the ones that said, sure, we could hire women, or Hear me out. We wear dresses.
I would just suggest that you don't try to do this in the state of Tennessee, because you might get arrested. So just be careful. Looking out for
And
everybody.
that's a shame.
Yeah, just be careful.
Ah,
It's so funny because Monty Python and the Holy Grail is one of those movies that, again, I can watch this over and over and over again, never get tired of it. But it's also one of those movies that, like, every time you see it, you see a little something different, and I love that. I absolutely love it. And depending upon what mood you're in, you'll experience something slightly different each time. I mean, the other day we were just making silly jokes about something stupid I can't even remember. And my kid walked up to me with these two giant bowls and put them on his chest and said, "Look, I have huge tracts of land." And of course, we immediately knew what the reference was and just broke down laughing so hard. So there's just so many good genius moments in this movie. Man, what a winner.
I will say it's the best written movie on my list. Period. So, number one for me, Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Excellent. Excellent, excellent. Well, I'm going to recap my list, and then you are going to recap your list, and you're going to give us some homework for next week. So, starting at number 10. My number 10 was Downton Abbey with George V. Number 9, The Tower of London, who I can't remember which monarch was in Tower of London, but there is a monarch in Tower of London. Number 8, The Madness of King George with King George. Number 7, The Favorite with Queen Anne. Number 6, The Green Knight. King Arthur makes his appearance at the beginning of this movie, and Sir Gawain gets tormented throughout the rest of the movie. Number 5, Excalibur. Obviously, King Arthur. Number 4, A Man for All Seasons. Henry VIII. Number 3, Henry V. Number 2, sensing a theme here, Henry II. And number 1, Lion in Winter, Eleanor of Aquitaine, and Henry II. Man, I went through those Henrys. How
Oh,
about
Henry.
you, Josh? I like my Henrys. I love my Plantagenets. They're awesome people. I mean, they're not, but they're awesome.
Well, my number 10 is America, the Motion Picture. My number 9, The King's Man. Number 8, 1973, Disney's Robin Hood. Number 7, Black Knight. Number 6, King Ralph. Number 5, 1963, Disney's The Sword in the Stone. Number 4, The Naked Gun from the Files of Police Squad. Number 3, They Are Robin Hood's Men in Tights. Number 2, Alexander Hamilton. And number 1, Monty
The Knights That
Python
Say
and the Holy
Knee.
Grail. Well,
Oh, darn. Oh, yeah. Okay.
yeah, Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Tis a flesh
Sorry.
wound.
I was just trying to get some shrubbery.
Maybe you can find one of those swallows I keep hearing about.
African? Oh, come on. We cannot do this all night. Josh, give us our homework for next week.
Homework for next week. It's not completely unrelated,
Ooh, that sounds interesting. Intriguing.
but it is going to be a challenge. It's a challenge, Jen. I'm challenging you.
I'm up for the challenge.
As I said at the top of the show, because I don't waste dialogue. Eurovision was this past weekend. And once again, congratulations to Sweden for winning out. But next week's list is going to be all about countries in Eurovision featured in film. So basically, what it boils down to, every movie on the list has to be set in or feature a Eurovision country. And you
Oh,
can't repeat.
you can't repeat? Wow.
Can't repeat countries.
Ooh.
Now, mind you, just because, I mean, for instance, say, just for clarification, uh, Austin Powers. I'm not going to use Austin Powers. I love Austin Powers, but no. Um, could easily be, England, right?
Okay.
And then you have European Vacation, where they also go to England. But I would allow both on the list because you could use one of the other countries that the Griswolds visit in European Vacation as, your, main focus. Get what I'm saying?
I think so, yeah.
So just so, at first I was going to say, just the 10 Eurovision countries. Um, so first you're going to have to research what those are. A few might surprise you, and pleasantly so as you pick movies. But I thought, well, I mean, this could easily just
Are
turn into these are my 10 favorite movies in England.
are,
And I was
are
like,
these
that's not fun.
are these the just the winners or the who the runners up were or
I I say this: if a country has been a Eurovision contestant, then that makes them fair game.
okay, that kind of makes things a little bit interesting.
So it's not just a matter of, I wonder what movies Jen's gonna pick, but it's a matter of, I wonder which countries she's going to focus on.
Okay.
And this is my sort of honoring Eurovision week because yes, I am that American that watches Eurovision. Finland got robbed.
This should be super interesting, I think.
I I'd like to think so. As Eurocentric or as Anglo-centric, um, as tonight's list was, um, having a wider scope for possibly and hopefully some more European based films would I don't know, it really opens up the the eyes, the minds, the soul, whatever you want to call it, for people to find out new movies, including myself, of which I'm hoping to find, some new movies because you always bring the new to the table.
Well, sometimes I bring the old, but
Well,
sometimes people think they're new because they don't know about them. So,
your old is usually new to me. as if we'll take just a brief second to say, remember last week you said that my personal homework, is to watch Hero,
yes.
and I did because I do my homework. Thank you. And we did have a little talk about it afterwards,
Right.
and it all boiled down to I loved it. So
And I'm so glad that you loved it because if I had given you homework and you hated it, I feel like that would have set me up for failure if I ever say, "Josh, you got to do this for homework."
so you put it all out there. You put it on the. What is this cat doing?
Trying to steal the show.
The, basically, I no, no, you're not take no. But I might post it to the Facebook page. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna post it. Probably not soon though, because my phone's at 1%. So I'm gonna. Okay. The
Oh, we
picture
got
is ready to go.
I got some good ideas for next week. Just as I was thinking about some things, I think I've got some really good ideas.
I'm once again going to kind of cheat the system and use Letterboxd to look at my statistics, which will show me specifically where I've watched movies from what countries.
Nice.
Yeah,
I think this could be super good, actually. Um, yeah, this is gonna be fun. I've already got a whole bunch of movies on my mind. Now I just kind of have to decide how to organize them into where they're supposed to be from. So, I think this is gonna be good. I'm excited now.
and that's all I was trying to do. Give
Very
us some
cool.
exciting homework to do.
Very cool.
Well, you know what else is exciting, Jen?
What is exciting, Josh?
Well, I was going to say the new season of Barry, but this isn't the show for that. What's exciting is figuring out how to pair what I want to eat with what I want to watch. Any idea how I
Hmm.
could go about doing that?
Well, you could pop over to this really cool little site called moviesandmeals.com and you could possibly find something that you might like to eat and a movie to watch along with it. Most of our recipes are inspired by movies that we find interesting, and they usually have some kind of thematic tie. This week, we are actually kind of a tie in for next week's list. We are going to be doing some food based on the Vikings. And I specifically have some that I want to do for this movie that we watched called The Northmen, which was really brutal. But man, what cool ideas for food we got out of it. So hopefully we'll get posting to those. Maybe they'll be there in time for next week's show. So join us over at moviesandmeals.com and join me tomorrow when I will be doing part 3 of Storyteller Power Hour. And tomorrow I am going to be talking about all kinds of interesting things that relate to story. And I won't. I won't get into exactly what we're going to talk about because I feel like it's still a little bit in development. So it'll be a surprise for tomorrow, but it's all things story related, and how to basically find your inner voice as a storyteller by discovering lots of information. So join us for tomorrow at the same time for Storyteller Power Hour. How about you, Josh? How can
Oh,
we
I'm
find
glad you
you?
asked. You can always go to widecomedia.com to find out all the cool, latest, greatest stuff going on at Wide Media. Okay, to be honest, the website doesn't really get updated all that often, but it has the links to the social medias. You go there, you click the links, you hit the likes, and that's it. Follow along. So whenever we go live, you'll be the first to know. Um,
Awesome.
so go do that. And if you still want to hear more of my voice, Friday night is where it's at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific is the Podcast, Writers, Actors, Directors podcast. This week, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and say we're probably going to talk about upfronts and more of the strike stuff because um, they're they're releasing the fall lineups and it's getting really interesting.
Yeah, it's getting really interesting.
So that's what you can look forward to this week. Hey, what do you know? I am psychic. So that's the Whitecast this week. Well, I had a blast doing this list, Jen,
I did too. Thank you, Josh. This was really fun.
and strangely enough, no crossover.
No crossovers. Well, there's so many movies out there that really. I mean, it doesn't seem like there are a lot, but in the context of the way that we built our list, there really are a lot. So I'm not surprised we didn't have too much crossover.
Well, we did have a few of the same kings, so I guess it goes to show just how meaningful and impactful some of these people were in time.
Yeah,
Um,
they're divas. they were divas. That's for sure.
So, with all that being said, and considering we've just passed the 3-hour mark, I guess there's only one thing left to do.
What could that be?
Say goodnight, Jen.
Good night, Jen.